Our fingerprints don't fade from the lives we touch. Judy Blume.
Welcome to Casa de Confidence, a podcast for you. You'll hear some incredible women
and some awesome, cool dudes
going confidently in the direction of their dreams and living in the purpose of their heart.
You're our host,
Julie DeLucca-Collins, and you are our sidekick. # handsome hot husband.
That again.
And the producer of the show.
That I am.
I am an author, speaker, coach, dreamer, and most of all,
we help people go in the direction of their dreams
and support them on their purpose. So pull up a chair,
grab a drink,
and make yourself at home because our casa
is your casa. Hey, welcome back to Casa de Confidence. This is Dan, and today we're diving into a story that a lot of us grew up with. I know Julie did, but most people don't realize how revolutionary that story was, or those stories were. And what if the books we loved as kids weren't just stories, but blueprints for confidence, rebellion, and identity?
Okay. Confidence, rebellion, and identity. I love that. But I just want to make clear today, I had the opportunity to interview, well, not today, but I interviewed Rachelle Bergstein.
That's our guest today, and that's why we're talking about it.
We're talking about her, but I want to make clear that she did not write the books that we grew up with.
No, she wrote about the books.
Nope.
She wrote about the author.
Okay, thank you. There you go.
Wrote the book.
There you go.
That we grew up with.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. For my love of God.
Oh my gosh. I was listening to the interview. I've already edited it. And it's pretty cool. A lot of the stuff she's saying.
Yeah.
And you guys have a good conversation.
We do have a good conversation. And I want to say that, one of the reasons when I connected with Rachelle, I thought, holy camazel, I need to speak to her because, first of all, she is a New York Times bestseller. She is a lifestyle writer for pop culture and families. Her work has appeared in the New York Post, NPR, and of course, she's got more than the book that we're going to be talking about today. She's got other books, Women from the Ankle Down, Brilliance and Fire, and The Genius of Judy. She lives with her husband and son in Brooklyn. She's a New Yorker, and you know how much I love interviewing New Yorkers on the show.
And who's Judy, Julie?
Judy Blume.
The Genius of Judy, how Judy Blume rewrote childhood for all of us.
Correct.
That's the full name of her book.
That is the full name of her book. And I've had the opportunity to not only read it, but I truly enjoyed it, especially because I am a fan of Judy Blume's. I am a fan of, and I grew up with many of her books. I grew up with the books that I think have created an imprint in the lives of so many. And I don't think that people realize what a prolific writer Judy Blume is. She, again, started writing back in 1969. Her first book was the one in the middle is The Green Kangaroo. And there were children's books, right? And then Iggy's House. And of course, the one book that a lot of people tend to know about, which, by the way, it is a new movie on Netflix. And I watched it and I felt like I was there, that this was my childhood, that this is me. And it was beautifully written, beautifully done. And of course, if you know what I'm talking about, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. And I cannot believe how freaking relevant this book is. Again, even after, that book was written when I was born. That was 55 years ago. And it's still incredibly relevant. It is still some of the concepts that as teenagers, preteens, we kind of go through. And it's giving us a glimpse into navigating relationships and the complexity that we can have. But most important, one of the things that I really love, right, about Judy Blume is that she is an advocacy not only for literacy, but it gives us a glimpse into womanhood, into the evolution of the roles that we have as women. And our guest, Rachelle, today really does unpack that for us.
I didn't realize Judy Blume was a badass until I listened to this episode.
Mm-hmm.
I never read a Judy Blume book because, comic books.
Well, she not only wrote, so she also got into, Judy Blume wrote some steamy books as well. Wifey.
Steamy books?
Wifey, yeah.
Oh.
That's a good book. I love that book. There's also the one that she wrote in, what was it? Summer Sisters in 1998. That's another one of my favorite books, and it's a good book. And the characters. Oh, okay.
So, Julie.
Yes, Dan.
Got a question for you.
Okay, ask me.
As a young girl, as a young woman,
yep.
When you started reading Judy Blume books, what's your earliest memory of maybe the first time you wrote a Judy Blume book, or a memory that strikes you as revolutionary or poignant in your life?
I was living in the library for most of the summers or vacations or after schools because we didn't have a babysitter. And when we lived with my mom, we were kind of left to our own devices. And I really hated television or didn't love it.
And you chose the library?
Yeah. Well, the library was across the street from my school, the public library. And a lot of times I would go and I would spend my time there. Now, in the summers when we spent,
I probably would have chosen the library too.
Yeah.
Or maybe the arcade.
Hey, by the way,
there were arcades back then.
I just want to say,
all over the place.
One of the things that I learned at the library that was not about reading, do you know what it was?
What?
How to make pickles.
How to make pickles? Yes. Oh my God, I'm halfway through this jar of pickles we bought yesterday.
Dan is eating pickles, apparently, because
I'm pregnant, apparently.
Well, you're not asking for ice cream, so therefore I am not going to, get worried.
They're little baby jergens. Oh, I love them. They're so good.
He's crunching away.
Anyhow, so it reminds you of your days in the library.
It reminds me, well, this is the thing, because I spent a lot of time in the library. I started to wander outside of the children's book section, and I would go into the other parts, especially because there was, and I remember so clearly, the Shenandoah Library, and I don't know if this is still the case in Miami, Florida, had in these windows that overlooked the park, and it was very sunny and bright. And the thing about Judy Blume books, they often explore relatable childhood and adolescent issues like family dynamics, puberty, identity. And that's exactly what I was going through.
So what we would call a tween period nowadays?
I guess so. But the one thing that also Judy Blume books do, like that Wifey, for instance, is the life of a suburban housewife and who was bored in her marriage and hated conventional life and begins to act out her fantasies of sexual liberation, self-discovery. And for something like that to be written in 1978, it's pretty much ahead of its time, right? So Sandy is, the protagonist of that book. And I think that it started to really put, I guess, a seed in my brain that life in the world, right, gives you this preconceived notion of what a wife is supposed to look like. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be satisfied with that, and that you can question the status quo, and that you can kind of be okay with exploring. And I am not saying that you need to explore, crazy things. Well, maybe if you're into them, you can. But the novel really delves, especially Wifey, right? It delves into the dissatisfaction of the traditional gender roles And last night, actually, you were sleeping. I came to bed and I couldn't sleep because, my mind is going 100 miles per minute. But Diane Keaton died last night. And she is one of my favorite actors. And I loved that here's a woman who, Annie Hall, and if you haven't seen Annie Hall, you should go check it out, even though it's made by that guy. But some of the other roles, there's one movie in the 80s that really, I went and I watched it last night again. Okay.
Diane Keaton movie
is Baby Boom, and it was made in 1987. And the movie starts off with describing this very successful woman in New York City who graduated at the top of her class in Yale and went to Harvard for her MBA and was at the top of her game. And she had a boyfriend or a fiance that she lived with in Manhattan, and they were both very successful and, worked 18 hours a day. And then she inherits a baby and she moves to Vermont. And, there's a lot of themes that still kind of stick today in this day and age. And there's a lot of things also that I think, thankfully, have changed. Like, for instance, the fact that, she loses a promotion because she has a baby. And the thing that really hit me, though, is that why is it that as women, we have to live in the box that somebody else built for us? We don't. And we can define what that's going to look like. She actually moves to Vermont and starts her own thing and becomes very successful also. But I hate that even though that movie was made almost 30 years ago, no, more than that, 40 years ago, right? Some of the issues and discrepancies
what was it called again?
Baby Boom.
Baby Boom.
Most of these things, the microaggression for women, are still prevalent in 2025. And that is why, my interview with Rachelle is super important to me, because we really unpack a lot of different points when it comes to what our society is saying and how impactful it is that we talk about women. And Judy Blume has been these central characters that has been bringing about these conversations for many years. And in an era where books are being banned, we need to bring attention to the reality, right? That we can, have storytelling be a part of activism. And little girls and boys can freely decide to be bold and confident as long as we don't make that as a negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stepping outside of the norm shouldn't be something that we say, oh, that's terrible. It should be something that we celebrate, because confidence requires bravery.
Cool.
Anyway, I'm going to get off my...
You're on
what
a
is this?
soapbox. Hey, you
Soapbox,
can't, to quote another 80s great, you can't put baby in the corner.
Well, the other thing too that I want to say is that women, I hope that if you're listening to this, you also know that it is okay, right, to be feminine and to enjoy lovely things that we women enjoy. And don't let anybody tell you that the things that you love are frivolous. Do not allow these things to get dismissed. And really, it is time for us to really be able to create the space to support each other, to give, cheer the woman on, even if it's not the lane that we want to be on. We are so divisive. And I want to say, as someone who is a child-free woman, right? My choices have been questioned and have been definitely criticized, and at times told that I'm wrong, right? But I think that we need to give space, because if I I could turn around and criticize somebody else's choices, right? But we need to just say, let it be, let it go, let people be in the lane that they want to. And Rachelle's book is brilliant. I've had the opportunity to read the book, and I highly recommend it. She is a very prolific writer, but she also really touches on some of these things that, to me, make incredible sense, that we should have these conversations, especially in this day and age. And I was all over the place.
Well, you know what time it really is?
And what time is it, Dan?
It's time to let two women talk about this topic.
Oh, okay. Well, no talking for you then.
I'm talking about you and our guest today.
I didn't say you were a woman.
No, I'm. This isn't about me.
Okay.
Not about me at all.
Mm.
So it's about your conversation with Rachelle Bergstein, and how great it actually is. It's a good conversation. And if you listen to it on the podcast, if you want to see these wonderful women, you can hop over to YouTube and you can watch it there also.
And if you heard all this rant in Facebook, leave us a comment and let us know that you watched. We want to know who's watching.
So, anyway. All right, Julie.
Okay, Daniel.
I want you to have a great day.
I am going to go clean.
Sounds like a great day.
Look at that. Gender roles defined.
Everyone out there, have a great week and enjoy this episode with Rachelle Bergstein and Julie.
Let's take a quick break.
I want to pause for a moment, because if you're listening to this conversation and realizing that some of these patterns, like people pleasing, second guessing yourself, or feeling stuck in the messy middle, are showing up in your business, I want you to know that you're not alone. So many other women that I work with are hustling hard but not seeing consistent results, feeling scattered because they're trying to do all the things, or struggling to make decisions without doubting themselves, or just plain exhausted from running their business without a clear plan. And that's exactly why I created the Confident You CEO Retreat. It's a space where you step away from the noise, you get clarity in what actually matters, and walk away with a 90-day roadmap that feels doable and not overwhelming. If you've been craving focus, confidence, and strategy that actually works, this retreat is for you, my friend. Head into goconfidentlycoaching.com and you can save your spot at the website. Now, let's get back into this important conversation. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Casa de Confidence. My friend, what if stories we read as kids were more than just stories? What if they were seeds of resistance, of identity, of confidence? Today's guest uncovered just that in one of the most iconic writers of our time, and the result, a cultural reckoning we all need to pay attention to. I am thrilled to dig into this story and the voices and the bold moves behind real impact. Today, I'm talking with the brilliant and bold Rachelle Bergstein, and I hope that was okay, a best-selling author, journalist, editor, and someone who just gets the pulse of what is happening today in our pop culture and so much more. So I want to dig into this conversation because her latest book, The Genius of Judy, How Judy Blume Rewrote Childhood for All of Us, is about an absolute force. I can't recommend it enough to you, my friends. This is part biography, part culture, and waking us up to a lot of the things that are maybe we've been sleeping through. So it's groundbreaking, it's lively, exhilarating, and I can't wait for you to tune into this conversation. So welcome to the show, Rachelle.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for that fantastic introduction. I really appreciate it.
Well, sometimes I think when people introduce me on podcast, it could go one or two ways. They either just read my bio, and which is fine, but then it's like, oh my God, don't read all of that. That's too long, right? Or they're like, oh, introduce yourself. And that's also kind of weird. Like, okay, what do you want me to say about me? Right. So I am trying and hopefully is succeeding at creating an introduction that I feel does justice to the person that is coming to speak to us today. And you reached out to me to be on the podcast, and I was jumping for joy because I thought, this person knows I love Judy Blume.
Well, I'm so glad it made you feel joyful. And
Yeah,
I
I
mean, don't we
did.
all love Judy Blume? That's,
Yeah.
one of the reasons I decided to write this book.
Yeah. And so, you've written about shoes and diamonds and one of the most beloved and banned book authors of all time. What thought through line connects all of these stories for you?
I get this question a lot that people say, you went from writing about fashion and jewelry to
Mhm.
Judy Blume, and what prompted that leap? And to me, it actually didn't feel like as much of a
Yeah.
leap as maybe it looks like at
Hmm.
first glance. Because when I started writing about shoes, that was my first book. One of the reasons I was so drawn to that topic is because shoes were something that so many women really loved, cherished, got excited about, to use
Hmm.
kind of a lazy word, were obsessed with.
Yeah.
And I wanted to understand that phenomenon. They were also
Hmm.
very readily dismissed as frivolous, right?
Oh, 100%.
And I thought to myself, if this is something that so many women feel so passionate about, maybe it's not frivolous, and maybe it's getting
Yeah.
dismissed just because it is something that women feel passionate about.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that sort of animates all of my work.
Yeah.
What are women passionate about? What are women talking about? What are women saying? This is significant to who I am that maybe other people aren't noticing. And Judy really fit into that category for me.
Hmm.
So many women I know, so many women I admire, respect, say Judy Blume shaped them. And yet, as I quickly learned when I dove into the research for this book, um, Judy Blume was not considered a literary author. She was
Hmm.
not really admired for her prose style. She was not necessarily respected by the literary gatekeepers.
Hmm.
And she was dismissed as just a writer of children's books.
Yeah.
So that to me was something I could really sink my teeth into.
Hmm. I think that, for so many of us, right? I love how you're talking about how things that we as women, right, love or are passionate about, or things that are so women like, at times really sort of get dismissed in our society. And it's so timely. I saw a video today in on Instagram, and it was just going through all of the different phrases that women and young girls are told. Oh, smile, you're so pretty. And it's like our society still, right? Nothing has changed necessarily from what my mom experienced as a young child. And she was born in 1943, right? And I'm hoping that through these conversations, Rachelle, that we can start to recreate the normal, and really for women, empower them in a different way, than because there's been some empowerment, but we still have to work at it. I don't know if that makes sense at all, or if I'm not making sense, because that could be it too.
It absolutely makes sense. And it's so funny. As soon as you said, little girls being told, smile, you're so pretty, I'm thinking, I have a quite handsome 9-year-old son. And I don't think
Hmm.
anyone's ever looked at him and said, smile, you're so handsome, or smile,
I
you're so
know.
cute. Um,
Yeah.
and, so we are getting that messaging, absorbing that messaging that we're
Hmm.
supposed to be pleasing and pretty and
Hmm.
delightful from
Yeah.
such a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed, I have an 11-year-old niece. She's actually trying out for Annie today, and I'm really um, crossing my fingers. But I was speaking to my sister, and my niece and I have been close since she was born. And in the last year, she entered middle school, I've noticed a shift, right? And I said she didn't practice. She hasn't called to showcase her audition piece, and she said she's not going to. She doesn't want to show it, practice or perform it in front of anybody she knows. And I thought, oh. Okay. And that really is a shift from the percussion's little girl, right? That I saw,
Mhm.
who would say, "Hey, I'm posing, pose, take my picture." And I think that that's something that all of us at one point or another really begin to experience from a young age. So this podcast and podcasts like this and your books are things that I'm hoping more people can get their hands on. So our little girls perform in front of us or still are excited about getting their picture taken or are not being told, right? Smile because you're pretty, or no boy's going to like you if because that's the narrative that we need to change these days.
Absolutely. And I think, Judy Blume's books really
Mhm.
present an alternative to that idea that girls need to be kind of simply lovely,
Yeah.
right? If I had to put my finger on a phrase, right, you have to be simple, pleasing, lovely. And the girls in Judy Blume's books, which she wrote starting in the early 1970s, they're quite complex.
Hmm.
And when I revisited them as an adult, one of the things that I thought was so interesting about them was that the girls had moments where they were really unappealing, right? They had moments where they behaved badly. They had
Right.
moments where they were mean. They were mean
Hmm.
to their friends. They were rude to their parents.
Yeah.
And these were just part of the kind of
Yeah.
complexity and constellation of being human. And
Hmm.
it didn't really have to do with whether they were girls or not, right? This was just a matter of being a human being and a child in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. I my first book that I've read, and I think that this is one of the books that most girls have read, and I can't believe that book is as old as I am, but it's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. What was your first Judy Blume book that you read?
So I actually think mine was also Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I'm not
Hmm.
100% sure because, as I've mentioned in other conversations, I received kind of a batch of hand-me-down books from my
Hmm.
mom's friend who had two older daughters.
Hmm.
So many of those were Judy Blume books, and I remember getting like a pile of like Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Blubber, Super Fudge,
Hmm.
Tales of the Fourth Grade Nothing. You know, I just read them one after the other. But I do remember picking up Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and thinking to myself, even at the age I was, which was 9 or 10, I don't know if this is going to be my thing. I'm not
Yeah.
religious.
Right. Right.
What's up with God in the title and in the first line
Hmm.
of the book? And then I was kind of instantly captivated. This
Yeah.
book was talking
Yeah.
about things like periods, like
Yeah.
sanitation pads, like
Hmm.
girls competing with each other over their bodies developing, and Margaret's relationship to God in the context
Right.
of her parents having really fraught relationships to religion. So all
Mhm.
of these things really spoke to me from an early age, and then I was encouraged to keep reading all of the other Judy Blume books that I had in my
Mhm.
possession.
Yeah. So now, what is the one novel that first comes to mind when we're speaking about her adult novels, and why do you feel that maybe she nails it also with the characters and the things that she covers? And again, the three that I've read are three that there are summer reads for me. Sometimes I go back to them from time to time during the summer.
So in terms of her adult novels, I think
Hmm.
you can't talk about Judy Blume's adult novels
Hmm.
without mentioning Wifey.
Yeah.
I mean, Wifey is her first adult novel.
Hmm.
She wrote it in, I believe, 1978.
Hmm.
And she really comes out of the gate so bold.
Oh, 100%.
So when you think about Wifey, it's really explicit. It's very sexually
Mhm.
charged.
Mhm.
Um, it's talking about a kind of lackluster marriage and everything that entails, including kind of like a boring sex life where
Yep.
the two partners are out of sync. And the really fascinating thing about Wifey is that when Judy Blume wrote it, she was a very established children's book writer, right? She had
Mhm.
already published
Yeah.
Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Deanie, Forever, Tales of a Fourth
Mhm.
Grade Nothing. So her publishers were terrified, right? They thought, Judy Blume is putting her name on this novel that's really sexually
Yeah.
explicit. And are children going to reach for it? And are parents going to be angry at her?
Mhm.
And the answers to those questions were kind of yes in some
Yeah,
cases. But
absolutely.
she didn't back down. She was like, this is what I wrote. I'm pleased with it. I'm putting my name on it. I'm not writing under a pen name. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think if you want an introduction into Judy Blume's books for adults, Wifey kind of smacks you in the face in a good way. You
Yeah,
know,
in a
it's
good
just
way.
it's a really fun book.
Yeah. And I remember being young when, younger. I was probably in my early 20s, and I grew up in a very conservative church background. I was the good girl who went to youth group, and, we were saving ourselves for marriage. But I loved a steamy novel from here and there. And I remember this kind of blew my mind because all of a sudden it wasn't just speaking about, oh, let's meet the guy and there's some, tension, and then there's like a problem, and then we get together and it's all great, right? This was really giving me a glimpse. And I think that, there's such genius in the way that she wrote this. And for you writing about her, is there a moment that perhaps came about that not just as a reader, but as a woman that made you decide that you wanted to pursue writing about Judy?
Well, I have to say, when I started to think about doing this project and I started revisiting the books that I had loved as a kid,
Mhm.
something became very apparent to me, which was the way that the mothers were written in her books. And that was something I never noticed as a young reader. Like, I could have
Mm.
cared less about the mothers in the books. And,
Yep.
they were like the Charlie Brown adults, like,
Yeah.
wah, 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 wah.
Yep. Yep.
Right. But now, I'm in my 40s, I'm a mother, and I was noticing just this fascinating thing in all of the mothers in her books, which is that they are really role models or negative role models
Mhm.
for grown women,
Grown
right?
women.
So
Yeah.
Judy put a lot of her, I want to say, opinionated self into the depictions of the mothers and the parents in these books,
Mhm.
right? In some cases, the mothers are warm, they are open, they are having the tough talks, they're pursuing their own ambitions. And these are kind of like the basket of the good mothers in Judy Blume's
Mhm.
books. And then there are the mothers that they're still trying, they're not bad mothers,
Right.
but they're really subsuming a lot of themselves
Mhm.
into parenting. They're projecting a lot of their own needs onto their kids. They're not fully formed. They're not necessarily grown up. And, I think Judy was telling her young readers a lot in those depictions of the mothers. Like,
Mhm.
there are two ways a woman can be in the world. And
Right.
one of them is a little bit more fulfilling
Mhm.
and, I don't know, fully fleshed out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, and I remember just looking at these characters, and for the first time, and this is more as an adult because I went back to Margaret's, hey God, it's Margaret. Are you listening? And I remember thinking, huh, the characters are not perfect. And it's complicated, and as a woman we're not just a one-dimensional person. We have so many different layers and things. And for me, a lot of the characters, not just in Judy's books, but a lot of the characters that I read about women really gave me permission in some ways to become a person of whatever values or thought patterns, because I saw somebody else that had stepped into that role imperfectly, right? But is there a book for you that maybe as a young girl or a young woman that gave you permission to step into to be yourself?
It's funny because the book that I remember reading the most clearly and kind of blowing my mind as a young kid was Just As Long As We're Together, which came out in the
Okay.
90s and is
Mhm,
not one of her major
mhm,
classics and is
mhm,
also not a book that I wrote a ton about in my book.
mhm,
But it really spoke to me because it was being so honest. It was being so honest about puberty. It was about
mhm.
a trio of girlfriends and all of the complex things that come up when you have three best friends instead of two.
Instead of two, yeah.
Um, I remember reading it so voraciously that I actually asked my dad not to read to me before bed for the first time when I was trying to finish it because I didn't want to share it with him. And what I really wanted was to lie in my bed and read this book. And, I had
Yeah.
to make a choice. So it really has like an indelible quality in my life. But what I didn't remember and what was really interesting to me is that when I picked it up again as a grown up, um, one of the major plots of the book is that the main character's parents are getting divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And the protagonist is named Stephanie, and she really, really, really doesn't take it well. She's so angry.
Yeah.
She's bitchy to her parents. She starts, binge eating and gaining tons of weight. She's mean to her friends. Um, and my parents had been divorced when I was 5. And unlike Stephanie, I kind of pent up all of my feelings about it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went back to this book, I was like, oh my God, this is why I loved this book so much, because it was showing me a different way. It was giving me permission to feel angry about this. And yeah, I think that it didn't necessarily happen on like a surface level that I was having that
Okay.
epiphany as a young child. But when I went back to it, it was very clear to me that that's what was going on.
Yeah. I have to go back to that book because I don't think I remember much about it. And in researching, I just felt like I'm going to talk to this amazing person and I want to talk about everything. And I don't think I can basically do that in the time that we have, but I'm going to try because again, Judy Blume has modern relevance. And for us, at least for me, there is something that I saw in your writing, and that's just a clear feminist heartbeat. And it doesn't feel forced, but how do you decide when to weave in your perspective and the subject that you're speaking about?
Well, thank you for noticing that because I do think that feminism animates a lot of my work.
Mhm.
And whether it's implicit or explicit, in this book, I didn't necessarily intend to write as much about second wave feminism as I did when I went into the project. But I was revisiting a lot of second wave texts to understand the context in which Judy Blume was writing. So I, reread The Feminine Mystique. I reread Sexual Politics by Kate Millett.
Mhm.
And as I was doing this, I was noticing the same thing come up again and again and again in these books, which was that these leading voices of the second wave, they were saying that the first wave feminists, who were the suffragists,
Mhm.
they were incredible. Um, they were amazing activists, but they sort of lost steam. They kind of petered
Yeah.
out once they got the vote, right?
Mhm.
That's what
Mhm.
they were campaigning for. They wanted the amendment. They got it. And then they just sort of like dissolved into a puddle of
Yeah.
well-earned exhaustion,
Right. Yeah.
And what the second wave women were saying was, we can't let that happen again.
Mhm.
We can't let a couple gains
Yeah.
happen and then, you know, the whole movement peters out and someone has to pick it up again in 40 years, right? So to me, that was kind of my eureka moment with this book,
Mhm.
which was that she wasn't necessarily doing it on purpose, but what Judy Blume was doing because of the time that she lived and her personal experiences, she was absorbing the messages of the second
Mhm.
waivers and
Yeah.
putting them into her books in real time.
Yeah.
And in doing so, she was training this next generation of readers to understand the feminist movement where it was and maybe to be able to pick up that banner and wave it a little faster than what happened between the first and the second wave. So that to me was so much part of this story that then it
Mhm.
became, kind of breaking down the feminist movement in the moments that Judy would have been experiencing it and sharing it with readers.
Yeah. I've been seeing a lot in the news, and I think that, for me, I've always considered myself a feminist, but now it just seems like it's such a um it's such a divisive title, word, or movement because we're seeing a lot of um, individuals and in groups that are talking about, a woman belongs in the home, a woman belongs in raising kids, and for me, a childless woman who's always been very driven in assertive, also, I guess wanting to succeed at everything that she does. I don't see myself in that role. And I never did. And yet I think that there's many young women who are starting to feel like, again, they're not going to belong because of their desires, or maybe the expectations that the world is giving them is different from what they wish they could have. Um, what are your thoughts, when it relates to that?
I mean, I feel what you're saying on such a gut level, right? This is a very difficult moment for the feminist movement, but it also means that we need it more than ever.
Yeah.
And even though maybe it's not trendy or popular anymore, the pendulum always swings. So we have had
Right.
moments in 20th century and 20th century history where, being a feminist is cool, being a feminist is like what you want to identify as
Hmm.
publicly. And then there are moments when it's not cool and the culture kind of swings to the right. But those are the moments when the feminist movement is really necessary,
Yeah.
right? To fight back against these
Hmm.
messages that the only way to be, and I'm not saying it's, not a good way to be, but
Right.
that the only way to be as a woman is to have a traditional home
Hmm.
where, you raise your children and your husband's the
Yeah.
breadwinner and whatever. Um, the movement, whether people want to identify it or not, has done so much work to give women space, even if they're cisgender in heterosexual
Hmm.
relationships with children, to give them space to be who they really are.
Hmm.
And, you know, we have to keep chipping away at these stereotypes, these walls that have been built for women, whether it's, on trend or not.
Hmm. Yeah. I so agree with you. This is the time in which we can, and it's so tiring. I think I was speaking with some of my allies, friends, community people who are women of incredible gifts and talents, and many of us have been feeling overwhelmed and defeated. And I mean, I remember in 2016, I woke up with a step, a pep in my step, and by the end of the night, I was devastated. And I think that I didn't see, right. Well, what can I do? What can happen? And what does this mean for me and others, right? And I think that I came back to that. But what would Judy, because I know that she wasn't necessarily that on purpose activist, but she really, her message resonated um and represented many women of different walks of life. What do you think she would be trying to say to us in this moment where so many things are going on?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is the book bans. The book
Yeah.
bans, which were a tool in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan
Hmm.
was president,
Yep.
and a tool being deployed similarly now. And
Hmm.
the idea of book bans, whether people who want to remove books are, explicit about this or not, it's to retrain children, right? And
Hmm.
to train
Yep.
them in the way that you think that they should be trained, right? So to give them less access to whatever teachings or knowledge or information that you disagree with,
Hmm.
and to try to box them in a little bit more, whether it's through you know religious teachings or just like denying them certain information, whether it comes like right now the big issue is LGBTQ
Hmm.
people, and books that represent them, um and book bans have just been wielded in this way that has been really frightening, especially right now. And Judy Blume is very explicit that she's against them. She speaks
Hmm.
out against them. She works with organizations that fight them. So I think that's where Judy Blume's like major activism lies now as an
Hmm.
80 something year old
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
She is fighting back against book bans. She has a bookstore that features banned books and saying, this is history repeating itself and we can't let it happen.
Mhm. I totally agree with you. And I think that, I've been thinking a lot about a young woman who I totally felt like she was my friend when I was 14, and that's Anne Frank. And I keep
Mm.
thinking, I couldn't imagine at 14 her going through that, but that she was dealing with the same things I was dealing at the same age, puberty and, questions on relationships and really also trying to keep it together in the middle of chaos. And I think that it's so important for us to allow our children. And what I see is that adults perhaps are maybe afraid that kids are becoming thinking and feeling humans then that can be trusted with their own feelings and can be trusted to question rather than follow blindly. And I know that that's a little bit of where I see that most people are trying to ban the offending content, right? Because Judy Blume in particular talks about puberty and periods and masturbation, sex, teen sex for that matter. And it really is the type of topic that a lot of people are intimidated by, even as adults.
It's so funny because I never really put this together before until you just said it, but isn't that really such an incredible lesson of Anne Frank's diary, which is that even in the most dire, the most terrifying, the most horrible circumstances, kids are still going to have those experiences of
Yeah.
thinking about their bodies, of making sense of their sexuality, of having crushes. And, so it just kind of goes to show that you can't shove that genie back
Mm.
in the bottle,
No, no.
like once a child starts going through puberty, like that's just the human experience, no matter their circumstances and no matter how blocked off they are from the rest of the world. Like she was literally, hiding, right? And she's still having all of these thoughts and feelings about her body. So, I think that's where I come down when I think about book bans. I
Mhm.
just think like how silly
Yeah.
to imagine that you could take a book away and that then prevent a child from having these thoughts
100%.
or right it's almost like that's very optimistic of you to think that you could somehow control this
Mm.
small human from understanding who they are in their body just by taking away a couple of books.
100%. And I think that, as someone who's written a book and continues to want to write, the thing that saddens me is that and I think, Judy Blume said this, that there's books that are never going to be written or read because of the book bans. And this is one of the reasons that we're not only stifling um, individuals to really see themselves in these characters, but really become those thinking and feeling humans, that it is a disservice to everyone. And I just hope that, through our conversations and continuing to bring this to the forefront, we can share ideas, right? And perhaps ask someone, why do you believe this is something we shouldn't talk about? And maybe that person can start to ask themselves that question enough to create a little bit of a shift.
Yeah, I hope that too. I mean, when I wrote this book, I hoped that people would come away with it with the feeling that maybe it's okay to let your children read. Like this
Mhm.
has become my rallying cry. Like, let the kids read, how
Yeah.
much harm is a book gonna do? Really think about that. Think about if you had read a book with a trans character as a 13-year-old, would that have
Hmm.
made you trans? Would that have made you gay? Like
No.
it's hard to imagine even a book having that kind of power.
Hmm.
Um, so, if one person reads my book and thinks, you know what, I have changed my mind on book bans, or I have softened my view on book
Hmm.
bans, then that to me is a success.
Yeah. I love that. And the point, case in point, if you're a child of the 80s, you probably were assigned to read Go Ask Alice. Reading a book about someone that had a substance abuse problem didn't make me have a substance abuse. If anything, it allowed me to really be able to unpack what may be going on for somebody in similar circumstances and become an empathetic person toward that individual. But again, it's so crazy. I can't even believe that this is the type of conversation that we're having in an evolved society. Can you?
I mean, no, I really can't. And Go Ask Alice is such a funny, perfect example because that book is actually incredibly didactic. And it
Mhm.
shocks me that
Yeah.
it gets banned still because the
Yeah.
message is so terrifying, right? I read that book
Mhm.
as a teenager, and, the message is really like if you experiment with hallucinogenic drugs, you're going to throw yourself out a window, right? So, don't you want your kids? I mean, that book is actually quite conservative. Yes, it depicts a lot of drug use, but she doesn't end up okay in the end. It's not like she had fun partying and then her
Nope.
life turns out
And
fine.
no, not at
So,
all.
yeah, it's funny to me that that book in particular still gets taken off of shelves.
It does. It does. And you are an activist of sorts, not of sorts. So you're a total activist because you have a Substack and that's Banner Year. And it is about this conversation. Is there a point that you decided that this was the best way for you to start writing and speaking out consistently and publicly about this?
It's so funny because I don't really think of myself as an activist, but yes, that Substack does have an activist bent.
Mhm.
And I started writing it because I was very inspired by Judy Blume's activism against book bans.
Mhm.
And I realized very quickly that if I were writing this book, I had to really be educated on book bans and especially what was going on in the current moment. And that why not, as I keep myself up to date on this developing story, why not write about it? And it's actually been a lot of fun. I've never been a blogger, but it's been a really great way to kind of work out some thorny, challenging issues on the page and to get feedback for that. And, I'm not always looking for everyone to say, yes, you're totally right. I welcome people saying, I don't know, that's not totally how I think about it. And because it is complex, there are so many different shades and strands of this conversation. And it doesn't always necessarily neatly break down along political lines. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I just started doing it because I wanted to have those conversations and I wanted to stay um, up to date on what was going on.
Mhm. Mhm. How do you handle, I guess, criticism when the conversations can turn so divisive? Because they do, right? I mean, even something that we don't intend to be divisive ends up being so. What is your tip for someone like me that maybe wants to continue to be in the public eye, or some other listeners, right? They have platforms, and then they also have very strong beliefs and values, and they want to stand up for them. What are your pieces of advice that you can share with us?
It's really challenging, and I have had to work at developing this muscle. So when
Yeah.
my first book came out and I got a negative review, I mean, I felt like skinless, right? Like I felt like I needed to wear a hat and
Wow.
sunglasses. I felt like everyone knew, it was like
Mhm.
this really raw experience. And now 3 books in, and I've published a
Yeah.
lot of articles that have had, lively comment sections, if you will.
Mhm.
And it still does get under my skin. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie. It's not like I have not become impervious, but
Mhm.
um I always try to remind myself, like it's become almost a little bit of a mantra, even though it's very cliche, which is like you can't please everybody.
Right.
And I think that that is really a skill. Like you can't please everybody. Walk away, right?
Walk
Like
away. Yeah.
once you put something out into the world, it becomes everyone's. And I just got a comment on my Substack that was like, I don't even know exactly how it was relevant to what I had written. But it was like she needed to share this. And that's within her
Mhm.
right, right? It's a
Right.
public forum.
Mhm.
So I feel that I work at it.
Mhm.
And I try to not let it interrupt my real life.
Mhm.
That's
Yep.
the best advice I can give. My real life is not, it's not on the internet, it's not in a computer, it's not even in a
Yes.
book. It's like my real life is something different, and that's what I'm
Mhm.
most invested in.
Yeah, I just, excuse me, released an episode with Kenya Kelly, and she is a TikTok, I would say celebrity, but she's a coach for individuals who are online, and her following is massive in the millions. And one of the things that we were talking about is how she chooses to share different levels with different people. And,
Mm.
there's people who think they know everything about her because she's online, but she's got to remind herself that no, those people don't know me. Those people know that part of me, and so on and so forth. And I think that that's the thing. It's so well said, and it's excellent advice, and that most of us need to remember that the internet is not necessarily defining us or who we really are. It's just what we're choosing to share at times in that platform.
Yeah, I very much agree with that.
Yeah. You've been called bold and groundbreaking, even wickedly provocative. How have you grown in confidence through your writing journey?
I actually remember that review, Wickedly Provocative, and it was one of the
Yeah.
first reviews on my first book. And I was like, oh, wow,
I
I
love
wasn't
that.
trying to be wickedly provocative, but I will take it.
Yeah.
And I do feel like I am bolder in my writing than I sometimes am in my
Mhm.
real life. That like I do get to put on that hat where I really just put it out there and say what I believe. And maybe it's because I can walk away from it. I don't know.
Mhm.
I also
Yeah.
like I when I'm writing, I play this game where I just tell myself nobody's watching. Nobody's watching, nobody's reading, no one's ever going to read it. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter. And it lets me have the freedom to just riff and try things and play.
Mhm.
And, I think as a writer, you need that. You need to just, put the blinders on and say, like, this, I'm not writing for an intended audience. I'm
Yeah.
writing what
Yeah.
I want to write. And that's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And that's what I have to do anyway to just be myself on the page.
Yeah, I think that sometimes we try to curate ourselves. Excuse me. And when we're curating ourselves, we're not necessarily showing up as the writer or the individual who we are meant to be, because that person is the person that has a message for that one person that is going to read it. And
Mhm.
sometimes we are cheating people from that gift. And I love that. If someone is trying to make a change, if someone is trying to put their voice out there, and of course writing a book is something that many people have in their bucket list but haven't started. You are a prolific writer. You've been published several times. How did you get started? I mean, obviously there's different ways in which people can go about publishing a book, but for someone that doesn't even know, like, when should I sit down? How long should I write? And I ask this often of authors, and a lot of times the answers are different because everybody's process is different. But perhaps your answer can resonate with someone today.
Yeah, I do find my answer is sometimes different because a lot of people have said to me, I want to be a writer or I want to write more. And the advice I get is that you have to do it every single day. You have to
Mhm,
sit down and do it every single day and just create a practice. And maybe that's what works for some people.
mhm.
But I don't totally resonate with that.
Yeah.
Um, to me, as a writer, I do have like periods where I let myself be fallow. I just let
Mhm,
myself think and experience and love and live. And then I find that I can bring that back to my work. So I always say when someone is trying to start writing, it's like, don't put all this pressure on yourself to write every single day. Don't put all this pressure on yourself to write the next, a 300-page novel. It's like just kind of dip a toe in your practice. Feel out what works for you. Maybe you are a person that you want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and write for an hour every day. Then that's awesome. But that's not me, and it might not be
Yep.
you.
Yep.
In which case, find that time in the week that A works for your schedule, right? Like
Mhm.
we all live busy lives and the logistics play a part, but also B, like when you feel creative. So that's different for every single person.
Mhm.
And when can you know, block out a little bit of time to be creative, to be productive, to not be disrupted, turn your phone off, like whenever it is, if you can find a time that you can turn your phone off, like that's probably a good time of day to try to
Yeah.
be creative. But yeah, I think like people put too much pressure on themselves when they say, I'm just gonna sit down and I'm gonna get up every morning
Yeah.
before all the kids and I'm gonna write. And it's like, well, that doesn't sound sustainable.
Yeah,
It
it
just
was
sounds
not
hard.
sustainable for me. I tried it and I wrote a good portion of my book like that. But when it came to continuing, that's not me. And I found that I am more prone to be better at writing or deep projects like uh 11 o'clock at night. Then I love just diving in when it's dark and quiet. And I guess this can be the same thing in the morning. But for me, I just feel like I can definitely dive into it.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
just about finding that
Yeah.
moment of the day that works for you or that moment of the week. Um,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so good, so good. So now, the book that you are currently sharing with the world, and again, you've written more than one, but the Genius of Judy, it's something that how Judy Blume really rewrote childhood for all of us, and I think that she didn't intend necessarily to do that, and what she really wanted to do is just to share that, hey, you're not the only one feeling like that, and for so many of us, I hope that this podcast is following on her footsteps, letting someone know that, we're not broken, we're human, we make mistakes, but we also can achieve so many different things only if we try. And how long did you spend researching the book? This book in particular.
I'm trying to think. So I believe I started in 2021 and then it published in 2024. So probably about 3 years
Okay.
all in. Yeah.
Now, did you, and perhaps I missed this, but did you get an opportunity to speak to Judy as well?
I didn't. She
Okay.
did not participate, but we do share a publisher. So
Mhm.
when the book was in copy editing, we were able to get her a manuscript for fact checking. So she did fact check it. And, that made me
Exciting.
feel like really good that she, signed off on what I had written. So,
Okay. I love that. I love that. So many different things that I want to encourage the listeners to do, and so many different things that this conversation we've unpacked. Would you be open to doing just a quick lightning round so people can get to know you a little bit better before
oh,
we
yeah, of
go?
course. Of course.
This has become one of my most favorite things. I don't know why I never really did these before, but somehow I forgot who I was watching and it inspired me. And I thought, you know what? I want to do that on the podcast. And because it's my podcast, I can. So tell me
Yes.
a book that changed your life.
Oh, man. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov.
Oh, so good. Oh, your bookshelf must look a lot like mine.
I wrote my high school thesis and my college thesis on that book. That's
Um,
how just incredibly complex it is and how much I love it.
so good. Okay. So, if you had to read something for comfort on a hard day, what would it be?
The Time Traveler's Wife.
Oh, another good one. Why? Why that book in particular?
I've read it quite a few times. I don't know. I just find the love story really beautiful.
Hmm. Yeah, it's timeless, but on bump. I can't help it sometimes. Okay.
Good one.
Yeah. Do you think did your 16-year-old self see you doing this, and what did she want to do, or would she be doing this if she could imagine it?
Yeah, I think she'd be pretty psyched. I really
Mhm.
wanted to be a writer. I think she might have thought I would have been a novelist, but she would take this. She'd be happy.
Okay. And the last question I have for you is shoes, diamonds, or books. Which one is the most about a woman, if you had to pick one?
About a woman or about this woman?
No, about a woman. Like which one says most about a woman? Her
Oh,
shoes, her
I
diamonds, or her
have to
books?
I have to go with books.
Yeah.
I'm a book lover in the depths of my soul, so that I'm gonna go with books.
Me too. It's interesting because the original, I don't know if I shared with this when you and I first met, the original podcast introduction, I don't even know where this came from, but I described myself as an activist, philanthropist, and lover of books, and nothing has changed in 5 years. So I'm staying true to myself. If anything, I'm reading more and more books. So, what are you reading now? What's on your night table?
I'm reading, this is a little out of character for me, actually. The book that I just read is more in character. I read The Dry Season by Melissa Febos,
Okay.
and I love her. And now I'm reading another nonfiction book called Number Go Up, and it's about
Ooh.
Sam Bankman-Fried and the crypto
Oh, okay.
explosion.
Fascinating.
It's just
Okay.
something I wanted to know more
Yep.
about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Listen, leaders are readers, so I highly recommend it. You know, I sometimes don't read as much as I'd like to, but that's definitely something that grounds me. And I want to encourage the listeners, number one, to pick up Rachelle's book. And she's got 3 books that I encourage you. But first, start with Genius of Judy, and then the brilliance and fire selected writing, and the women from the ankle down. And what other things can people do to connect with you, to stay in touch, learn what you're doing, or support you?
Well, I have a website. It's RachelleBergstein.com. I have the Substack that you mentioned, Banner
Mhm.
Year. I'm on Instagram at Rochelle WB, and those are probably the main ways.
Okay. Well, I'm excited that you stopped by. You're going to have to come again, and we can unpack so many different things at another time. Rachelle, is there something I didn't ask that you want to leave us with?
No, I don't think so. I would love to come by again. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Well, you're amazing. And my friends, I want to encourage you to go and get the book. And since our friend Rochelle's on Instagram, go send her a DM and let her know what you loved about this interview. And of course, I want to challenge you. Pick up a book. Pick up a book that you haven't read in a while. Pick up a book that perhaps makes you uncomfortable and takes you out of your comfort zone. And then see the magic that can be found within the books. And until next time, my friends, don't forget, go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Thank you, Rachelle.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks for listening to Casa de Confidence. We thank you for listening, and if you want more, go to casadeconfidencepod.com. Check Julie out on her socials as Julie DeLucca-Collins. And you can also check out her website at goconfidentlycoaching.com. Have a great week, and don't forget, go confidently in the direction of your dreams.
Hi, everybody. I know that sometimes we get very lonely in this entrepreneur journey, and I want to invite you to join us into our limited time only Purposeful You Mastermind. For many of us entrepreneurs, we believe that we can do it all, but the reality is that doing it alone only creates a lot of overwhelm. So join us at the Purposeful You Mastermind. You can find out more information by going to bit.ly/Julie's Mastermind. This is going to be the place where you are able to then unlock your full potential and achieve long-term success for your business. Push you behind your current limits, expand your connections, discover new ideas, and implement them with confidence. You're going to get the support in all aspects and transforming you to the 6-figure business you've been looking for. Pause and get off the hamster wheel if you've been spinning around. This is a time where you can get that support from like-minded entrepreneurs that are here to join you in your journey. Together, we can challenge the assumptions and land the speaking engagements and opportunities we want to grow our business and make an impact in the lives of people. See you then. Remember, you can find the mastermind at bit.ly, Julie's Mastermind.